what up, Long Beach? Welcome back to another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk, brought to you by a couple of guys who are cooling off with football talk. I am co-sports editor JJ Fiddler, to my right.
Co-sports editor Mike Gardabasio. Yeah, it's playoffs are heating up, but it's not playoff season. And to my right,
Tyler Hendrickson. I'm hotter than a sunny day in hell, to be honest with you. It is very steamy in here. But got to take time out to thank our hot sponsors down on 2nd Street. If you want to feel that ocean breeze, get down onto 2nd Street, eat at Naples Rib Company.
Hot wings.
Walk across to the hot sausage, candidly. And then walk to the other side of 2nd Street and find Papa Lucci's down there and get yourself some hot nuts, dude. Get those hot nuts.
Obviously, visit all of our sponsors. They make this show and everything else possible, covering everything Long Beach sports. And like I said, football talk this week. We feel very lucky. And the reason why we feel very lucky is because we have the top two teams of the Pac-5 within our coverage map. Defending national champion St. John Bosco Braves are number one. Right behind them, the always dangerous Long Beach Poly Jackrabbits. And it's been a while since we've had two local teams that we cover this good.
I think it's Poly and Lakewood in 2008 was the last time, and Lakewood was not as ranked as highly as they should have been.
Never were.
Time. Right. So yeah, it's and this is a football show, but it's worth noting we also have the top girls volleyball team in Southern California. So the two sports that everyone talks about in high school in the fall, we're the guys who get to cover the best teams, which is always fun.
It's really quite awesome, and candidly, I mean, it's not just on hypothetical or on projection. I mean, those are the last two Pac-5 champions. So, and then Bosco took it a step further with the state championship. So yeah, they're pretty qualified. So we're not just making this up or blowing smoke. I mean, the proof is on the football field. Angel Stadium, raise a plaque if you dare.
Now, on this episode, we're going to kind of pull the curtain back and go beyond the headlines, Grantland style.
JJ, keep the curtain closed.
Grantland style. It's been an interesting few years for high school football. We've seen the landscape change so much. I think we've been writing 2 to 3 articles per year about off-the-field issues with local high school football. And I think this is a perfect time with these rankings coming out. Poly and Bosco being atop the Pac-5, what we all consider the best division in California, if not Western United States.
Nay,
and
the world.
And these rankings, these polls, they do them for all the divisions. And we've got to shout out our Lang-wide sports editor, Fred Robledo, for breaking this story. Things are about to change in high school football. Again.
Well, and they're about to change. I think this is really the big change. Fred broke the story after an interview with CIF Southern Section Commissioner Rob Wygod that Wygod is endorsing a plan that would have football playoffs broken up the way that they break up the basketball playoffs, which means rather than the Moore League as an entire league being in Division I in the Pac-5, just the teams that would, they'd break those teams up. So Poly would be in the Pac-5, and then probably everyone else would be below the Pac-5 in other divisions. But they do this with basketball. We actually like it a lot because it allows teams to play against schools of their own level. So the Compton basketball team, which would not necessarily be the most competitive in Division I over the years, can compete with other 1,500 student enrollment schools in Division IIA. I mean, we like that a lot for that reason, but I think this will be great for Long Beach because the Moore League really forces the conversation on this.
And it was not based on, or should not be based on, or will not be based on enrollment in schools. It's going to be based on performance on the field in a small window, a 2-year window. So if they were realigning this year, they would look at 2013 and 2012 as their case for moving teams around and changing. They're not going to be saying, well, that team was really good in the 90s, so blah, blah, blah. This is
argument.
Yeah, thank you. What have you done for me lately is what these playoffs will be decided. And honestly, we've been clamoring for this for a while, so we're pretty excited.
Right, said Fred. Yeah, we really do like this format for playoffs because, you look at the Moore League, like you brought up, Mike, it's the case that always gets brought up because it's the only public school league remaining in the Pac-5.
It's the reason they reduced the number of playoff teams guaranteed for each league from 4 to 3 for the Moore League.
But now you don't have to worry about it because now these inner city schools that cannot spend with the private schools, they can compete in the league and still have all these rivalries and things like that and play locally. But then when it comes playoff time, as long as they qualify, they can get in and in their division be very competitive. And then we could have multiple champions just from this league. So I think it's a great step forward for competitive balance to the other type of schools. But you still get those big marquee matchups that you're looking for in the Pac-5, Poly against these other schools that we've grown to love.
Well, I'd bring up a negative, which we have had with basketball, is that it's more complicated. With the leagues, you go, well, the league goes there, right? But here, it's not there's no BCS formula, and even if there was, there'd be a problem. But a potentially flawed system determines who goes where. And I think sometimes in basketball you do see something like, say, at St. Anthony, where they have someone like Kendall Cooper. So for 4 years, they have one of the top 10 players in the country in her class. And then at the conclusion of that window, it's going to take a few more years of returning to the sort of resting level of competitive balance before they get moved back down.
You're saying they should do it every year?
No, I'm just bringing it up as a thing because this does always come up. You're never going to have it perfectly aligned.
The human element?
Right.
The communism element?
Or even if they just adhere strictly to a formula, there's a flaw with every formula. There's no perfect formula, especially for something as subjective as sports.
Can I speak to that a little bit? Because I think football is perfect for this format because it's harder to have the quick fix. Because sometimes you see basketball teams pop up out of nowhere.
We see that every year.
Exactly. So you have teams that haven't been good, but they get one guy or two guys or one gal, two gals, and all of a sudden, boom, they're amazing in these lower divisions. But football, it takes a little more time because there's so many more players on the field. It's hard to just overnight become, okay, now I'm a Pac-5 contender, whereas I wasn't before.
Well, and you're absolutely right about that, but I would point out you are still going to have, particularly with inner-city teams, and they're not a Southern Section team, but look at a school like Crenshaw, where they go from producing like the best high school football players in the country to this year, or when we saw them, very down. And if a team like that's in the Southern Section, you're going to go from, they would have, based off last year, certainly the last 2 years, been slotted in a Division I spot. Mm-hmm. But then a team like a Crenshaw that could drop off this year that's a tough out.
Yeah, so you have to kind of build at the right time and sort of because after these last couple years, then next year they'll get moved down,
right?
But then they might be great again,
right? Exactly. But you have to do it based off that window because what are you going to do? You're going to have an assistant commissioner evaluate talent. Right, and say, well, this year's Crenshaw team does it. You can't do that. You have to adhere to that 2-year window in the formula. I just think it does sometimes create lags. And like I said, anytime you make something more complicated, there's going to be controversy. We've seen that with the state bracket.
Well, so the controversy will be based on choosing the teams, right? And choosing the teams are going to be based on the polls. Well, the polls are basically decided by the same people.
The Football Advisory Committee of the CIF is the one who puts that stuff together.
So, talking about those polls, we talk about them all the time. Mike does a weekly by the books column. People love to know where their team is ranked or where their rivals are ranked. It's very important. We've also gotten a lot of people who ask us, how do they figure that out? Well, that's, like Mike said, a system. Everybody has a system when it comes to polls. You look at college football, which I would consider broken, because you still take into account a coach's poll that is so ridiculously outdated. They should call it the Sports Information Director's poll at this point, because there is no way that any of these college coaches are actually putting these votes in, because they don't watch anybody else.
And they can't.
They can't, and they shouldn't, honestly. They shouldn't. So, about these polls. These polls are important to CIF football because the top 4 teams, let's just take the Pac-5 for an example, the top 4 teams are then seeded and the rest of the playoff bracket is not seeded. So it's not like if you finish the year ranked 8th, you are then going to be seeded 8th in the playoffs. That's not how it works. The top 4 teams are seeded. So I got an email from somebody last year, I can't remember who it was, but they were asking me, why don't they just do the top 4 teams as a poll? Which is a good question, but that leaves so many other people out.
Well, it also removes the transparency of right now we know who's 5, 6, and 7.
Right.
So if the teams in the top 4 lose, it's not just a potentially kind of random seeming series of teams. We know who's on the borderline there.
So let me float this. I think we can improve the polls by not doing them during the non-league schedule. So you watch these teams, you see records, you see what teams do against each other. The playoffs are unaffected by the polls in September. But in October, and if you put those teams in, I would argue that they probably would be the same teams that are in that top 10 right now. But like Tyler said, and like you said, Mike, you're then evaluating talent for a team you have not seen play before.
And I think we're all of the opinion that the preseason rankings in the CIF are often kind of silly because it's basically just how they finished last year with no real look to what the team's going to be like this year. We saw that with Poly this year. But I guess the thing I'd point out would be, Poly moved from low in the top 10 to 2 over the course of this non-league schedule. And so if they beat Corona Centennial and stay at 2, by the time you're talking about let's start putting the rankings out, they'll already be in a spot where if they go through the Moore League undefeated, which I think everyone expects them to, they've locked their playoff spot up, and we've been able to watch that happen week by week as the stock rises. I actually think that's better than, like, Poly's not going to play anyone worthy of evaluating them against during league.
Right,
so
but
I think it makes more sense to look at it week by week during the non-league games when you get a better look at who a team like that is.
So if they did that first poll in the first week of October, would Poly not be slotted exactly where they are right now if they do beat Corona Centennial?
Yes, I think it's safe to say that they would. My kind of issue with it, looking at it, is it's when you do it week by week, you get a great amount of transparency, which when you're talking about, especially in the Pac-5, those top 4 seeded spots are really critical. But to me, I'd like to see, okay, which game moved this team up 5 spots?
Okay, maybe asking for moving it to October is too far. But let's at least watch these guys play one game before we put them on a list.
The problem that arises is that you have the poll that comes out in the preseason, and you stick to that, and you sort of look for, and this happens in college all the time, you look for a reason to move teams down rather than just letting everybody start on an even playing field and saying, that looks like the best team. That looks like the second best team. Because, for instance, Bosco is the number 1 team. And they are going to remain the number 1 team until they lose, right?
Yes.
But if, and I don't think this is the case, but if you had watched the first couple games or watched the preseason and you decided, I think this team looks better than Bosco, you would never put the other team first because you're basically acknowledging that you were wrong in the beginning, but it gives you a much greater freedom to just rank the teams as you see them after they've played, whereas now you have to go back and say, no, they didn't look good enough in this game, so now is the time that I'm going to decide that I was wrong about Bosco being number 1. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, the word that you just said that is why I would have a problem with doing it that way is freedom, because I think covering Long Beach sports, we all feel at times, say you're covering a water polo game, or even you're just looking at the way the water polo brackets are constructed, freedom to me often sounds like, oh, this coach's advisory committee has nothing but Orange County or private school coaches or something. I would like to know. I don't want there to be any freedom. I want to know, what did you do? Why did you do it?
Well, you're still going to get the week by week, Mike. You're still going to get the week by week. You're just starting after you've actually seen teams play, rather than basing it, and then you're stuck to your prediction.
Well, but you're saying
sticking to your prediction.
But you're saying don't do it until after the non-league games are over, correct?
That's what I said.
You're not going to get the week. That's what week by week snapshot of Poly after league starts is not much of a snapshot.
That's what I said, but I'm saying I'm backing that up. Let's just say 2 weeks. If I propose right now, you wait 2 weeks. A 0-week game, a 1-week game. So everybody plays.
I like it the way it is. I think it's good it's the way everyone does it. I think it's good to just get that. It's good for media. It's good for everyone.
The way everyone does it usually isn't a good reason.
No. But I think it is. I mean, it's just a preseason poll is a standard thing to do. I think it makes sense. It helps media. It helps fans go, oh, this is the number 1 versus the number 2 team.
Interest of full disclosure. I just don't like preseason polls in general.
Well, how are you going to write by the books with no books? So I think
there you go.
You're taking my gig away.
I think we're getting to the root of the problem. Actually,
this is good, man. I like pulling the curtain back and talking about stuff we usually don't talk about. Stick around. We will get to big games this week. The games that we will be at, and that you will see the full coverage on PressTelegram.com and GazetteSports.com, as well as in the Press Telegram on Friday and Saturday. Stick with us. This is another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk. We've kept our eyes peeled for years, and we're bringing you Uni Watch. It is the Proj run of LBST, and we've got our own resident Tim Gunn, Mike Artabasio, who loves Proj Run so much
Great show.
that he records it and watches it. He rewatches the film to see if there's anything else that could have been improved.
He watches the all 22.
Eye in the sky don't lie, man. Eye in the sky do not lie. Mike, we're doing Uni Watch. I think the perfect place to start is Poly, because the first time I saw the new Poly jerseys this year with tradition across the back, which is hands down my favorite thing on a high school jersey I've ever seen, we knew at that moment, it's time to talk about some uniforms.
Well, the Jackrabbits definitely had the splashiest move of the year, I think, because they're in non-gold helmets for the first time. As you take a look at our model, Jackie Jones here from the Jackrabbits. First time in non-gold helmets since the helmets were leather in the 30s. So quite a departure for them. But I think the response has been pretty unanimously positive that the black alternates are great. Now, Poly actually was ahead of the curve on the alternates, because I know like in the 90s when Chris Lewis was there, they'd wear black just for the homecoming. They were kind of cheap. I mean, they weren't the top quality jerseys. They were kind of mesh sometimes on the bottom half, especially. But they looked great. Everyone was fired up to see them when they'd come out like that. And so they're sort of getting back to that a little bit. And now, of course, this alternates craze has really spread across everyone, you know. Now Poly and Bosco and all these teams, La Mirada, will advertise, we have 61 uniform combinations and all this stuff. Actually, Nate Burstel, who's the cross-country coach at Poly, is also a math teacher, said he's going to start using this year as a word problem. It's like a computational thing. He might bring up, like, okay, so, you know, if they have 4 socks and 3 pants and 2 jerseys and 2 helmets, how many different uniform combinations can they come up
That's funny.
with? But speaking of Project Runway, Poly had a true make-it-work moment, JJ. This is a great Uni Watch story that I don't think we really did. They'd ordered these matte gold helmets, and when they got them from Riddell, they only had 4 of them or 6 of them in the style they wanted, and the rest of them were a different kind of gold. They were shiny, they weren't matte. So Poly has been practicing in red, like Paramount colored helmets through the whole non-league schedule while they were waiting for their helmets to get back. Fortunately, they got back in time for the first game. But
the gold ones.
Yeah, the gold ones. But that was kind of funny. It's like, yeah, we talk about they wore the black games in the game, the black helmets in the game, but in practice, you went out there and it was the Poly Paramount Pirates.
Yeah, I think that was the #1 comment on YouTube on that preview video is, who is that and why are they wearing red helmets?
What's up with those helmets, though?
Can we also say, as a disclaimer, this is not a reflection on your football program, all right? If we say we don't like something, it's not that we don't like you. It's just that we're trying to have an opinion about, you know, colors.
It's strictly the aesthetics of the jersey.
That being said, I don't like the black helmets. The tradition on the back is saying something. Hold on, the tradition on the back is saying something. And then the thing that you have the most recognizable helmet in all of high school football. Honestly, Poly's golden domes are the most recognizable.
I'd actually probably have to say that the modern day 3-stripe might even be more recognizable than Poly, just because no one ever calls Poly the Golden Domers or like refers to that. But the modern day 3-stripe is like their entire identity.
Well, nobody else does it. Well, nobody else does those stripes like that, you know.
Yeah.
But other people, you know, will wear the all gold, and then especially like in college, you know, Navy and Notre Dame kind of have that, so that's what you associate. But not even at the college level, they do the 3 stripes.
Can I say this? I don't know about the multicolored face masks. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence about it.
Why do you hate all the things that are great about the world? I don't understand it.
What?
It's weird.
I just don't. I think maybe the gold on the black looks a lot better than some of the other ones I've seen. But the matte gray face masks on a multicolored helmet. Just
who's wearing
do
those?
less.
I haven't seen that.
Do less.
Who's wearing those?
I mean, almost everybody on their alternate helmets have the different color face masks. I think it's obviously more prevalent in college, but those specifically the gray face masks to me.
I thought when we looked at as we take another look at Jackie Jones and the Poly Blacks, when Tyler and I first saw those, I think we really responded positively to. There's a lot of little
but those are
touches
gold.
on it.
Those pop.
Right. The face mask looks incredible because it's the gold chrome. The Funk House on the back of the sleeves is really great. That's an old Poly reference. They have Scholars and Champions on another one. So I think that what people are doing is they're giving themselves a chance to kind of tie their own history into what they're wearing, while even taking little departures like changing the helmet colors. But I'm a huge fan of it. I think the Poly ones came out. I thought the Bosco ones looked great as well.
Well, yeah, speaking of Bosco, we're going to bring in our own. He's one of our own. Chris Trevino. He's one of our own. Bosco beat writer extraordinaire. You saw the alternates first because you were at the photo shoot where you had to beg them to take them out.
I was, but I actually saw them before that when they broke over the. If you don't remember when they broke on social media, all the people were posting about it, and then I saw them in the office when I was working on the story. But that was the first time I got to see them on an actual football player. A pretty good one in Josh Rosen there at the photo shoot.
What's your take on them? Do you like them? Are you a fan? I mean, let's also, full disclosure, you're from Maryland, so you know something about ugly alternative jerseys. I mean, did you see them this week, guys? Come on.
They're rough.
Come on.
They're rough.
You pronounce awesome wrong. I'm just going to let you run it there, so you might want to correct on that. But I really, really liked the new grays, the new gray alternates that Bosco has, especially the helmet with the tomahawk. Just looks really, really nice. But yeah, they're not like overdone crazy, but they're nice and clean and legit, and just they pop and they look really nice.
The first team we really saw come out in the grays like that was Poly, those combat grays. And I'm sorry,
camo grays, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry to remind Bosco fans of those unis, but here's a thought: they both have these grays. Poly's got to have those in a locker somewhere. If they meet in the playoffs, Just go to vets, let the fog roll in, and they both wear the grays.
It would look like one of those old electronic football games where the guys are just kind of vibrating around the field. Nobody would really know who was on who, but they'd be playing football.
It would be looking
theoretically.
It would look like you were playing an NCAA football game, but you didn't have the color tuner wasn't working. Or were playing on a black and white TV.
Could I just suggest as the theme music for that highlight Yakety Sex?
Oh, absolutely. From alternatives to just colors, like what's your favorite color on a football jersey?
Black.
All black?
I have something about the black alternates, or like the Arizona Cardinals doing the black jersey. They really should have black pants, candidly, but I love the black.
You know what I actually really liked, just because I hadn't seen it before. Obviously, I think the classic colors of the teams that we cover look great. The Lakewood is a classic look, right?
That's what I was going to say.
Polly's got a classic look. I actually thought Westlake with the AM/PM blue and orange was kind of a nice. I actually liked it. I thought it looked kind of crisp.
For all of you Long Beach natives, I said that their jerseys looked like the to-go cups that you get from Fantastic Cafe.
Absolutely.
But you know what? I think that's part of why I liked it, because I have nothing but fond thoughts for
Do I need to go to Fantastic later today and get a picture of those cups to put on this show?
Yes. You do.
Okay.
And a breakfast burrito. Let's be honest.
I'm surprised you didn't already go get a breakfast burrito today, to be honest.
That's a good point.
But if I'm shouting out the blacks, Dominguez really sticks out. They got the black helmets, and they added a little accents to the jerseys. They got the little white collar. It's sort of like a priest collar, though. I wish they would go all the way around. It just has the V on there. You know what I mean? It's got the little V. It looks good, but I would have preferred the full white.
They've been abstaining from losing games this year.
They have just the all white collar though, but Dominguez with the all black hat is very classic, and black jerseys just look really nice.
Well, we were talking about the all colors. I love the all reds at LBCC, and LBCC loves them too.
Yeah, but they didn't wear those this week. They had their blacks on, but they were dancing. They were looking so nice.
The blacks look good. The blacks look good with the new helmets too. The matte black with the shiny red.
But the all reds made the hype video for us this year.
Without question, I'm excited for when they're going to bust them out. They wore the red tops in their first game, but we haven't seen the all reds yet. That's got to be a rivalry game. I think they might do it for Mount Sac. That's a big enough game. Their next home game.
Accoutrement also comes into play. Mike mentioned it a little bit earlier with the writing down the back of guys' arms. Scholars and Champions, Funkhouse for Poly. You see the all wood at Lakewood. I gotta be honest though, they're kind of distracting sometimes. For example, Mayfairs are
I don't like
distracting.
those gloves with the sticky stuff on them either.
Mayfairs are distracting. They're like a magic eye. If you look at them long enough, something's gonna pop out at you.
It's all been downhill since they added more than 2 bars on the face mask for JJ.
That's true. Since I added face masks, candidly. No, I think if you're talking about the numbers, the gradient, it is tough to read, and we have had some issues with numbers for sure.
And I had a major issue with that at the Poly Narbonne game, where literally our photographers were coming up and showing me pictures of me. I'm zoomed in on this. I can't see what number this kid's wearing.
Well, numbers, speaking of, are my favorite thing, Mike. Here you go. My favorite thing in the world. White hats with numbers on them. Lakewood's got that, dude, and it is just so old school. I can't get enough. My dad went to Penn State University, so I'm a fan of just plain jerseys that are all the same. So all whites on the road, all colors at home. Mike mentioned it, Lakewood. I really like Lakewood's jerseys. And as a guy who's a blue guy, Dodger fan, Everton fan, Charger fan, it's tough, man. I love those reds, though. The all reds with the white hat.
It's a classic look.
It's a real classic look. And can I also say, Lakewood coaches might be the best dressed coaching staff if you like Argyle.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about best dressed coaches, I think Elijah Asante at Compton might step in and have something to say about that, because he's always suited and booted getting it done. And speaking of Compton, they have one of the more interesting logos, because it looks like the North Carolina logo, but they make the N into an H, so it's interesting. And I've seen some kids going with the 3 logo approach. They're out there looking like they're in a 605 All-Star game, because they have the logo on the back and the logo on each side, which is interesting. I hadn't seen that before.
And a Batman logo on the face mask.
Yeah, but the Columbia blue is obviously a great look. That tar base.
Is that a do less situation? I feel like I say that a lot when looking at uniforms nowadays.
Yes,
it's like,
hey, because you're a fuddy.
Do less. Just do less.
I think a little bit less. I think that was I think it's one too many logos because they're big logos. But speaking of only having logos on one side, I like Paramount with the P on one side and the number on the other.
Yes.
You don't see that very much.
That's what Lakewood does too.
It's classic, and it's kind of nice. I respect that for the P mount helmets.
I do like that. I also like when the spats on the bottom are the same color as your hat. So let's say you got a white hat and then you got white spats and then the solid color in the middle. That is strong.
Who was it that did the Chuck's design, the Chuck Taylor design on their spat? That was awesome.
All-star spat tape job.
No, we notice these things, okay? Because we get to the games early and we see them. But I'll always remember seeing Matt Rowe at a Poly game in effectively house slippers that Clara Ashu, the spatter extraordinaire over at Poly for a long time, put together for him.
No, those house shoes were clean, man. They look like Bruce Lee out there.
Ooh.
All right, so one last one. And yes, Mike, I'm a fuddy-duddy. Not a fan of the neon, dude.
You're just not a fan of anything.
It's
Old man fiddler.
It's for running
Old
late
man
at night.
Fiddler hating on the sweet.
It's for
sweet
running
evenings.
late at night. It's for working on the side of the freeway.
You are the Michael Kors.
There
of
are
this,
certain
of this Uni Watch
things
segment.
that neon are for, and it's just not for football jerseys.
I mean, I humbly disagree. I don't know what to tell you. Like that's the new craze. You look at all the All-Star games and things like that. People love the neon, and I mean, Cabrillo does it. They have the neon lids. They have the logo on the front stretching to the back, so nothing on the sides. They really let that pop off. It's been a new change under Jason Brown, and I mean, I think it looks good. It's I wouldn't call it iconic, but it helps them stand out.
It's definitely, I think especially for a program like Cabrillo that's trying to build, there's a strong element of all pub is good pub, and when did we ever talk about Cabrillo during a uniform segment or something like that before they started doing this? It's just a way to get talked about, and that's what you have to do if you're trying to take a program up from a 6th, 7th place spot to a 2nd, 3rd place spot.
Well, it's a young program, so they're not like spitting in the face of tradition. They don't really have any. They're growing, and that's a thing that they can do.
We want to hear what you have to say. What are your favorite jerseys you've seen so far this year? And let's expand it to all sports, man. What are your favorite jerseys that you've ever seen in high school? And I'd also like to say, if there was a LBST GazetteSports.com press telegram jersey, if we had a football team and it was that blue and gold, I mean, it could look pretty clean.
It could.
We're keeping the neon away. Forget that. We're going with the numbers on the helmets.
Yeah, JJ's only caveat is that the jerseys can't be interesting in any way. Because he'll frown on that.
Get your Photoshop out, design it, and let us know. That could be kind of fascinating. I don't think we're going to be able to make them, but we can dream.
I think it's a very solid challenge for next week, and in the famous words of Heidi Klum, Auf Wiedersehen.
Rankings, playoffs, uniforms, they don't mean anything if you don't play the game. Who are you going to schedule? We're talking about 0 week. We're talking about non-league schedules. Coaches decide it, but sometimes there's more to it than that.
Can I just make a motion to kill all this 0 week noise? I mean, it used to be cute when like people didn't used to play in that week, but just call it week 1. It's not like a special thing like, oh, I have 0 period.
It was special in its infancy.
Yes.
I remember the first year I was actually working at another local newspaper where they had to bring us in and talk to us about how we were going to reference week 0. And as somebody who had recently played high school football, didn't really make much sense to me. Now, it makes less sense.
Well, and here's the point Tyler has brought up before that I'm going to just blatantly steal and pass off as my own, although I did credit you ahead of time, Chicago manual style, is what do you call the games now that happen before the 0 week game? Because, for example, Bosco played this year a week before 0 week. So are we to call that a negative 1 week game? Is this on a number timeline? Or, I mean, it just if it's the week everyone starts playing, that should be week 1. And if it's the week before everyone starts playing, that should be week 0. So to me, Bosco should have played in Hawaii week 0, and then week 1 was the week that everyone started playing. Right? I mean, does that just not make inherent sense?
Yes. I'm sorry. If you're counting the number of weeks in the season, use counting numbers.
Well, and how many times do you have to explain to someone? Okay, so this is we're talking about the quote unquote week 3 football games, which will be the 4th game for basically everyone that we're covering.
It just doesn't make sense. It just creates unnecessary confusion because everyone plays in the quote unquote 0 week. So just start calling it week 1, and then for the rare occasions that Bosco or somebody plays in Hawaii, then you can call that 0 week.
If you were going to high school and every single person had a 0 period class, they'd just call it first period. You know what I mean?
Ding!
Well, past 0 week, you still have to figure out who you're going to play. And like I mentioned, coaches make these schedules, but they sometimes have more to it than that. Take a Jimmy Nolan at Lakewood, for example. He is a first-year head coach playing someone else's schedule. And it's a tough one. You got to go to Sarah, to Loyola, to Vista Marietta. If he had his druthers, probably wouldn't want to do that in his first year with thin numbers at Lakewood. But you don't get to decide.
Yeah, he inherited that schedule, which is tough. Over at Mayfair, they have a very compelling schedule that they created. Mike Fitch, not a fan of the travel. They're only playing in 3 cities this year. in their 10 games. 3 different cities, which is crazy.
Which are Lakewood,
Cerritos, and 1 game in La Mirada because they're playing Glen at La Mirada. That's it.
By comparison, St. John Bosco is playing in 3 states in their non-league schedule: Hawaii, Nevada, and California.
And that's their non-league schedule. I'm saying 3 cities throughout their entire slate. It's bananas. I mean, but their fans get to see all their games because they don't have to travel hardly at all.
So if we did a line graph saying the quality of your football program in recent years and also the difficulty of your schedule in recent years, comparing your opponent's recent years' records and how well they've been, if we did that line graph, where do you think the average best schedule would be? Would it be very high if you're a tough team, play tough competition? Would it be very low? Or is the kind of middle ground where you would want to end up?
I think most teams, it seems to me, on average schedule slightly below themselves because you want to be 3-1 or so going into league. I think I always give credit to Coach Negro at Bosco and then Coach Lara previously and now Coach Pierce at Poly, because those 2 teams are the best 2 teams in the area and they play the best teams. Which, if you recall, when Thad McNeil was at Lakewood and Poly were the 2 best teams. Lakewood didn't always play the best teams.
They never played the best teams. But McNeil admitted to as much and said he had a reason for it.
He wanted to be healthy, he wanted to be confident, he wanted to put up big numbers.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
It worked very well for them. But I do think if you look at a Bosco and a Poly, I personally think you're better served, especially if you're Poly and you're in sort of a weaker league. Bosco, I understand Bosco taking a couple of weeks off because you're going to get beat up in your league. You know, the teams that are so big that it's going to grind you down, and if you're trying to play a 16-game schedule, you don't want to be that beat up going into the playoffs. But Poly's going to get, Lara referred to it last year effectively as a 7-week bye, and so you may as well get your big game experience in the non-league.
Well, I think that's what it is. It depends on what you're playing for. Poly knows that the league is not necessarily up to where they're at, so they need to play challenging games in the preseason to get ready for playoffs. Bosco's going for a national championship, so they want to build that resume and prove that they can beat all these elite teams.
We knocked off Hawaii. We knocked off Oregon. We knocked off Las Vegas.
Because as you mentioned, I mean, the Trinity League is going to challenge them all year, so it's really no weeks off, is it, Chris?
Absolutely not. I mean, like I talked to Nego when the schedule first came out way back in April. We're trying to build a program. We don't want to just have one good season. We want to keep building and building. So we have to play the teams that are going to get us there, and that's what he was doing this year. And obviously, it's a little hard to get game scheduled because they said they had to call over 100 people, 100 teams. And no one wanted to play them, so that's how they got that Norwalk game. But they're definitely building a national schedule because, that's the way it is now.
Well, we're talking about the 2 best teams in the Pac-5. Let's back it up a little bit. Those middle-of-the-road teams. I think the key to good scheduling in high school football is having both. Having the team that you may be bigger than, your school may be bigger than, maybe an opening week game with your home crowd that you know you're going to win. Maybe also reaching a little bit, challenging your kids, saying these teams think they're going to beat you like you beat that team on opening week. Make sure that doesn't happen. Challenge your football team. I think it's important to do both.
I think that's a great point. I think what we have are 2 great test cases in the Moore League of the extremes of that. We've got Millikan, who's 3-0, hasn't scheduled the toughest of schedule. But they're winning. They feel great. The momentum behind Millikan football is at an all-time high.
And people are talking about
Millikan. But what's going to happen when they start to play some tougher teams? They haven't really been in the thick of it yet. Cabrillo, they have a brutal first 5 games. They're likely going to go 0-5 at this point. They're really struggling. They didn't have that cupcake win that I think really would have helped them. And so we see that team kind of wear down. I mean, Jason Brown, he's not scared of anybody. He goes out and schedules the best. But, does that hurt them because they lose confidence? They don't get in the rhythm of winning and learning how to win, and then they get beat up.
And you can get injuries, exactly, yes. was the last point. Yeah, and I mean, you look at Millikan and Cabrillo as 2 teams I think we're looking at as maybe with Lakewood in the mix as well, competing for that 2nd, 3rd spot in the Moore League. One of them's 3-0 and feeling great. They're on the cover of the paper. They've had features written about their running back. The other's 0-3. There's some struggles on the sideline. Guys are frustrated about it. It's a good point that schedule really can kind of determine the arc of your whole season.
We're not quite sure what week it is, but we know we're going to see some football this weekend, and we've actually got game ode to week. Poly and Corona Centennial. Our throwback Thursday, if you want it, because it was last year an epic matchup at that Mission Viejo Classic really early in the season.
It was. The Jackrabbits prevailed in that one. I drew, see, if you're talking about your sort of graph of pluses and minuses, I drew the the best lot in terms of the best game with Poly Corona Centennial, but I also have to drive to Corona at rush hour on a Friday. So
From someone who reluctantly grew up in the IE, I feel for you, bro.
yeah,
Corona.
yeah, I don't get to just cruise over to Vets like Tyler gets to on Thursday night, you know. But yeah, I've got that game. I think there's no question that's the best game being played this week.
Corona Centennial a little bit down though, like we saw at the Mission Viejo Classic when they got kind of handled by Mater Dei.
Yeah, but they've bounced back. I mean, they only lost by 1 point to Bishop Gorman, who's a consensus like top 10 team in the country. They lost 43-42, and I mean that's big time. You know, to play that well and score that many points against a Bishop Gorman defense that was supposed to be stacked. So you could say they started slow.
Oh, their offense is not the problem, Mike. Their defense is the problem.
And that's never the problem. Is never offense at Corona Centennial. It's that they want to beat you 70-60. So if you can hold them to 50, you might be in good shape.
You got a shot. It's a magic number.
But to be honest, it's interesting because I think in previous years that matched up very well for Poly. This year, I don't know about that because they don't have a defense. The defense is very talented and they can play once they get going, but they've kind of spotted 14 points to the last two teams they played, neither of whom were as good as Corona Centennial. So, you know, the classic Poly teams where they're going to score 21 points and they're probably not going to score more than 21 points, but they're not going to give up more than 14, that may have been a better matchup for the Jackrabbits, whereas this year, I don't know, because Poly, I don't know that their defense is focused enough. At least we haven't seen that the last 2 weeks. You go down 14-0 to a Westlake team that is vastly inferior to Corona Centennial in terms of their offense. So, and there was no interception return. There was no fumble, scoop, and scored. They just gave up 2 touchdown drives to Westlake to start that game. If they come out and do that against Corona Centennial, they could be on the wrong end of a shootout as opposed to, like they did last year, shutting them down defensively and scoring enough touchdowns to win.
As always, we will have that video on GazetteSports.com Saturday morning, but the story of that game will be in Sunday's newspaper because of that late start. It will be on TV as well. But, like Mike said, doesn't have to go to Vets. Tyler gets that, but he's doing it on a Thursday.
Oh, yeah, a little early action. And Los Al fans, it's about time they get a game at Vets. I mean, they had 7 straight road games last year, and then they even had a home game last week, but they had to play it at Millikan, so that was kind of bizarre. They won that game, and it was our boy who we called out on last week's show, Jacob Gasser, who made a 40-yard field goal, his first varsity field goal, and won them that game 17-16. I don't want to sit here and take credit for him making that field goal, but I feel like he must have been motivated.
You get the loose change off of that credit.
Absolutely. I think that's fair. And so now they
get the interest off the credit.
Now they get to take on Canyon, a team that they beat 7-0 last year, and I think they'll be in better shape going into this game to go to 3-0. And I think Los Al has done a good job with their scheduling. To
I'm
go back
right
to
there with you.
Every game is challenging but winnable, and so I think they're in a good shot as they round it off with the toughest game because they're at Narbonne, which is probably going to be their biggest challenge. But we'll see how they look under the lights at Vets because I think this is going to be a Sunset League champion and a playoff run team.
I can't wait to see this. I am on board with the Griffins this year. I think they can be very exciting, and they're playing in a division, as we were talking about playoffs and polls and all that. Mm-hmm. They're playing in a division that's takeable right now, and I bet on Barnes.
Absolutely. It's takeable when your middle linebacker has as many tackles in a game that John Barnes has coached at Los Al years, basically. Matt Locker with 26 tackles on the books against Eastlake. Oh my. Some teams don't run 26 plays.
We mentioned Bosco at top of the Pac-5 rankings, but Bosco is off this week, so with the bye, Chris Trevino is traveling to La La Land.
I will be in Lynwood, which I'm told will be the first time we do a video in Lynwood. So a little historic there, which I'm excited about. Lynwood, if you want to see a team score, you like offense, I suggest getting down to Lynwood for this game on Friday. They put up some points last week, 72-0 against Maya Angelou High School.
Is that good?
It's not bad.
He's right, it's not bad. And this is homecoming this Friday, so they should be very early, but they should be fired up for that game. So I'm expecting another big offensive explosion.
Yeah, taking on Lancaster in that game, so that should be good. And again, local football, the bottom of local football, just kind of stepping it up overall. Lynwood being a great example.
Pop quiz, who is the most famous Lynwood alumni?
Most famous Lynwood alumni.
Bruce Lee.
I don't know, basketball player probably, like a girls basketball player.
Little known fact, Weird Al Yankovic graduated from Lynwood High School. In fact, he named an album, I believe 2 albums ago, Straight Outta Lynwood.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Is Yankovic his real last name?
Yes.
Yeah,
his dad, I think, actually briefly taught polka at Lynwood High School. Lynwood was a different school demographically in those days.
You don't say.
But actually, I know this. My wife's dad coached and taught at Lynwood for 48 years.
Oh,
and
shout
actually
out to Papa San.
Yeah, Papa San Higa actually had Weird Al play tennis with him.
What?
Yeah, I think he had.
I think I know what our last segment of next week's podcast is going to be. I'm actually going to be at Millikan Downey, where those Rams are going to be playing their first big game in front of a probably big crowd there at Millikan High School. We were talking about it earlier and the excitement and being 3-0 and all that stuff. Downey on the other side, 2 years removed from a CIF championship run. I'm excited to see this game, but I want the over-under from two teams, Huff and Gordon. I mean, I could be out of there by 9 o'clock. If you really think about it, because these are two teams that want to control the clock with the running game.
Gordon and Huff is like a TNT cop drama.
It is.
It's right after Rizzoli and Isles.
Gordon Huff!
I think I'm excited to see if Gordon, because this should be a more competitive game than their last couple. They haven't played Donald Gordon a whole game. You know, he hasn't played a whole game yet.
Hasn't needed to.
Right, no, he hasn't, and they've been smart to get him out. So I'm kind of curious to see how many carries he's going to get, because he was out basically after the first quarter last week.
Over under 57 combined carries for those two kids.
Over.
I think so. They're going to be some tired boys.
And Huff becomes all that more important because Downey loses their QB, their starting QB, Trevor Hill, to the broken the wrist. So they're probably going to be running it all game, trying to not put pressure on who's ever back there this week.
I think we've all got very different games this week. All of our games are going to look very different. So you can check all of those highlight videos at GazetteSports.com and the Press Telegram all weekend long, as always. That's it. That's all. There ain't no more. Another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk in the books. Like I just said, we're going to be out covering football this weekend. Real quick, let's whip it around the horn. Give the people something else to watch other than football. Mike, I think you mentioned it at the top of the show.
Lakewood Girls Volleyball Team, currently one of the top teams in the nation. They're 12-0 going into this week's mega tournament, the Durango tournament in Las Vegas, but they're currently number one in CIF. Like I said, they're nationally ranked. They are as good a team as we've got in Southern California, and they're very fun to watch because they've got three starters who've played together all 4 years as starters on that Lakewood team. So they've got a very nice, developed, intuitive kind of play. Tyler and I saw them take down Santa Margarita for the Dave Mose Tournament Championship, and they didn't play that well and still looked very good. So I'm excited to see how they do. If they come out of Durango undefeated somehow, they're going to be legitimate national championship contenders.
That's a big if, but they got the talent to do it. Also wanted to mention news that's sort of just leaking out right now. Long Beach State is going to put up a brand new 60-footer video board at the Pyramid up on the concourse. So obviously that's a very exciting development. So make sure to go check that out. It will be up in November.
We can finally see a life-size picture of a 60-foot burrito.
These are the things that are important to Mike. Also, that's going to be the biggest screen in the Big West in Southern California inside an on-campus arena. So we got that going for us, which is nice. Also, get your Kiss Cam face ready.
Oh, absolutely.
Mike went volleyball, so I'm going to go volleyball. Check out Norwalk of the Suburban League defending their league title along with Jasmine Guzman, reigning MVP and the best player in the league over there. They begin their title defense next week when league starts.
Speaking of title defenses, I've been watching Wilson Water Polo recently. They opened up their season with a win over Newport Harbor. They then beat Los Alamitos earlier this week at the brand new Belmont Outdoor Temporary Pool, which I have got to say is real nice, man. You get out there and your first question is, this is only temporary?
It's not.
We should probably leave this thing out here forever.
That's why they're leaving it out there, because it was like, for an extra $1 million or whatever, they can make it a permanent facility.
Oh, $1 million bucks. Nice. I love how
they're spending $100 million on the indoor facilities.
Yeah, government's working in a different tax bracket than the rest of us, but there's a huge meeting about that Belmont situation, we'll call it, on Wednesday night. So this coming out on Thursday. Get to GazetteSports.com, get to the Gazettes.com, get to Press Telegram, because there's going to be full coverage of that. Decisions that will affect the future of aquatics in Long Beach for a very long time. And as we all know, Long Beach is the aquatics capital of America. So it's kind of a big deal. Stick with us all weekend long. Stick with us all fall long. Stick with us all year long. For Mike, for Tyler, for Chris, for JJ,
For Suge Knight.
for everybody, for everybody else involved in this show and the websites and the
Suge Knight to come
newspapers.
tell you to stop saying for JJ when you yourself are JJ.
You've been trying to do it for years. That might actually
listen to
work.
Suge, though.
We'll see you guys in the stands this weekend. Take care, Long Beach.
Happy birthday, EB.
Anybody have anything?
Is Suge Knight more famous than Weird Al?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think so?
Yes.
Suge Knight went to Lynwood?
Yeah.
Yeah.